greatest generation defended us from the terrorists of their day in the late 30s and the 40s. And they came home, and not only did they defend freedom, but they expanded extraordinarily our economy, in part because we invested in them, the GI Bill. We gave them the skills to do so. And they built the greatest economy that the world had ever seen. And it created the largest benefit for the greatest number of people that the world had ever seen. But unfortunately, over the last 20 to 30 years, with some exceptions, we have acted in a way as if there were no tomorrow in terms of borrowing. And so we have now this extraordinary budget hero election edition to say, okay, what would you do? And among the most pressing issues, well, I've already said that, and we failed to address the debt in a serious way. I want to say in a nonpartisan sense, this Congress has been abysmally negligent when it comes to dealing with the deficit. Because if you're going to deal with the deficit, you need agreement, you need consensus. Not just one group, Democrat or Republican, saying, this is my solution. Because ultimately, this is my solution won't work unless it's our solution. A bipartisan solution on which we not only have consensus in the Congress, but we have consensus in the country. Because you have to make some tough decisions. And in order for politicians who are representatives, they represent the views of the American people. So if the American people aren't conveying views that are consistent with getting us to fiscal discipline, very difficult for politicians who are representatives in a democracy whose premise is that representatives will do what the constituents want, very difficult for them to do that. So we need to create a consensus. This is one way to create consensus to affect this end. I want to congratulate, I guess I'm not going to give these remarks. I want to congratulate the Wilson Center, my friend Jane Harman. Dean Kettl, I want to congratulate you as a graduate of the College of Business and Public Administration, focused on government politics and minor in history. I'm particularly close to that. Of course, been involved with the Public Policy Institute as well. But I want to thank all of the students here and all of those of you who are involved with the Wilson Center. Thank my good friend Connie Morella for being here as well. Now, do I yield to you, Jane, or Connie? Let me then yield to Connie Morella, who, as I said, had a very distinguished career in our state legislature, then was elected to represent one of probably the most knowledgeable constituencies in America, in Montgomery County, Maryland, to represent them in the Congress of the United States. And she did so with extraordinary skill, ability, and good humor, and a willingness to compromise and work across party lines. How we need that today, my friend Connie Morella.
I approve this message because it's pretty exciting. I worked with David yesterday. I saw him and we talked about the game and how you could play it. And I just think it's something that touches people from ages 8, maybe even 6, to 90. They can play it. And you know, I love Congress. But Congress seems to have deteriorated in terms of the lack of conversation, working together. Compromise is not a word that you find in the lexicon unless it's done in a derogatory fashion. And people feel that way about Congress. It's got the lowest rating I think it's ever had, even lower than Watergate. And incidentally, as an aside, please know I loved serving with Jane Harman. And now that she is director, president, and CEO of the Woodrow Wilson Center, I feel it's almost worth going down there to park in that darn parking lot where I can never find my car afterwards. And David, who is so involved with putting this together, and Dean Stottle, it's a pleasure to have you here and your students. So I'm talking about the fact that Congress is at its lowest ebb ever in terms of the perception of the people. And why? Because it doesn't seem to be able to get things in order, particularly the budget. And everybody knows, every newspaper, Washington Post and all, have talked about that fiscal cliff and how we're getting so very close to it. What timing for this budget hero election edition? It is perfect for people to begin to look at it and say, you know, these decisions that these members of Congress have to make really aren't that easy. And when you talk about I want to preserve Social Security for when I'm older, or my defense spending has got to be maintained, in fact, accelerated, you know, how do you do it? At what expense? And so this puts it into your hands to be able to make some of the decisions and to see how it works. I remember having town hall meetings and talking about reducing the deficit even then, and somebody would inevitably say, oh, you just get rid of foreign aid. I mean, we're putting much too much money into foreign aid. And so I would say, well, what do you think that we put into foreign aid percentage-wise? And the answer would be 15 to 25%. I say, no, it's under 1% that we do, and how critically important it is. So you see, it's an educational tool, and people love playing games. You all say Congress plays games. Well, this is the kind of game that maybe we can even get them to play too. So I say onward and upward. I hope you'll all play it, but even beyond today, I hope that you will go off and tell others about it, and we can find other venues, you know, through educational institutions, including below the college level, to get these students working on it. And even at adult centers, you know, if you could get this into some of the adult centers too, it'd be very good. So I am just very honored to be here to say, you know, play on. It'll be pretty successful. Right, came on. Thank you very much. Thank you. And now Jane.
Thank you all. I'm Jane Harman, Steny Hoyer's oldest friend. And I'm mindful that in about 5 minutes, a global hero is about to receive the Congressional Medal of Honor. And so, Steny, I know you have to leave, and I think Connie has to leave, but not before you're presented with the American Public Media T-shirt. Connie, bring yours up here. This is a photo op we need. Come on, come on. And then I will formally thank
Where's
American.
yours?
I wear it every day. All right. Oh, you want to without the mic in it. There is a long-serving politician. But thank you for helping us get the word out. Please feel free to leave. But as Steny's walking out, he will laugh when he hears this. The year was 1964. Before most of your grandparents were born, and I was a college intern in Washington, D.C., and through someone else, I was introduced to the staff of Senator Daniel Brewster of Maryland. And the staff at the time included this fellow, Steny Hoyer, and Nancy Pelosi. Would you believe? So that's why Steny says we grew up together. Bye.
I also have to say Steny does a heck of a good job.
Certainly does. I commend, yeah. It is, for those who think there are no friendships on the Hill, they are wrong. These are dear friends of mine, and they were great colleagues of mine, and leaving Congress was bittersweet. However, I got a better offer, and the Wilson Center turns out to be a place where there is a bipartisan, safe political space, free from spin, and we can do the kind of public education efforts that you're about to see. And we can pair with American public media and people like Linda to get the word out about how we need budget heroes. The budget heroes don't live or work here, with all affection for staffers that I know in the room. The budget heroes are outside of this place and need to become more knowledgeable and put pressure on Congress to make a deal, which will be a very hard thing to do. I have the experience of knowing Congress can do this. I was elected to Congress in 1992. Many of the women elected then lost in 1994, alas. But in 1993, some of us made a career-risking vote for a Clinton budget. In 1994, some of us worked on a bipartisan basis to support Penny Kasich, those were two members, which would have cut $100 billion from the federal budget. It lost by 4 votes in the House. And in 1997, most of us voted for a balanced budget, a real balanced budget, no kidding, no spin, scored by CBO as a balanced budget, and 5 years of prosperity followed. We got a little off track after 9/11 for some reasons that are defensible and some that are not. When I came to the Wilson Center, I learned from Dave Rajewski, our science and technology guru, about this game which had been launched with APM in 2007. And my little light bulb went off, and I thought, this is great. We need to update this and keep it going. And so with Linda and the APM folks, we did update it, and we've now updated it again into the fabulous, wonderful Budget Hero Election Edition, which we're rolling out today, and which we rolled out this morning, actually, at the University of Maryland with Don Kettl and some of his ACE students, 2 of whom are here, and they played the game. And you will hear the reports on what happened when they played the game. But I would just make a few comments about that. First of all, I asked all the students this morning, how many of you are registered to vote and planning to vote? And they all said yes. If they hadn't, I would have made those who were not registered to vote leave. But the point is, kids are going to vote in this election, and kids want to learn information about the budget. And you'll hear how they, I don't want to reveal what happened after that, but it's not just kids. 1,300,000 people aged 10 to 80. That means most of them in the voting age range, including a lot of gray gamers. I guess that's me, are doing this. And in this game, on a voluntary basis, you can give information about what party you belong to, where you live, etc. And so we have learned that 40% of the people playing the game are women, that they are still evenly split, I think, among Democrats and Republicans and independents, and that, and that number is growing. So we feel that Budget Hero Election Edition is a silver bullet, or could be, to get the public in the game, to create the people who are truly knowledgeable about this budget, free from the spin of whatever television or radio station or newspaper or blog site you may read, who understand the facts about the various parts of the budget and who want to make informed decisions and who want to work together to make the compromises that are necessary to get to fiscal sanity. The fiscal cliff is a really ugly metaphor, but if you think about it, it's not just going up to the cliff, it is contemplating who will fall off and be at the bottom of the trough. And the really sad part of that is the kids who are going to, or the people who are going to fall off and be at the bottom of the trough are our kids and our grandkids. And I just, as one former member of Congress, recovering politician, grandmother, and step-great-grandmother, will do everything I can to prevent that from happening. And I want to thank my colleagues at the Wilson Center and the rock stars at American Public Media for making this game even better than it was. And thank all of you for getting the word out. Finally, let me just suggest that we think that this could be, I didn't have a chance to mention this to Steny, that a link to this could be on congressional websites. This is a nonpartisan game. It is produced by nonpartisan institutions. And we think there is no ethical issue. If there is, somebody will tell me, but I'm not aware of any. And so I want to put out there certainly the recommendation that members of Congress who are interested put this on their websites. And that way the public tuning in, hopefully, before they vote, on what Congress is up to, what their members up to, what we could do better, will get access to this game. So it's on the Wilson website. I'm sure it's on the APM website. It's on the screen right here. And right now, we're going to proceed to tell you all about it. Thank you all for coming.
Before we jump into the game, I'm Don Kettl. I'm Dean of the School of Public Policy, and I want to say first how thrilled we are to be partnering with the Wilson Center on this truly exciting opportunity to be able to figure out the things that matter. And I want to begin by introducing why it is that it matters, not by all the policy stuff that lies behind it, but first with Desiree Lucky, who was leader of one of our teams a little bit earlier, one of our star students who is a joint student in our program in public policy and in law, and Zach Cohen, who is one of our students, joint with our program, undergraduate program that we have, and is also worked with the House Republican Conference. That we have people who are playing this game, and they're playing for keeps because they're playing for their future. But even more importantly, there was one of our students who couldn't make it down here, who was playing it for more than that. As best we can tell, her baby's due in November. And so she was there earlier, literally playing for the nation's future, her future, and her unborn baby's future. This is really about trying to figure out how we can put this together. And the thing that was striking in watching this game is that first, all the students, we had 4 different student teams working on this, and every one of the teams managed to find a way to the finish line. Each of the team's path was different, but as you'll see, there are ways of being to see how far can you push the fiscal problem. And the dates, one group pushed out to 2036, one to 2037, one to 2039, and one to 2040. So all of them pushed it far out into the future, and each group, without exception, did it by cutting benefits that affected them. Each of the groups, for example, agreed to extend their own retirement eligibility for Social Security in exchange for promise of being able to address the questions that really affect the country. Each of them made decisions that had to do with student aid, with infrastructure and other things, because they knew that it's going to be a little harder for us, but if we don't, that we're not going to be able to get to the future that we want. The consensus out there is that we can't solve these problems because nobody can make the short-term decisions in exchange for the long-term benefits. This is a group of students that was willing to give up long-term benefits in exchange for the short-term decisions as a way of trying to underline the fact that it can be done. And you'll see how they did it in just a second. But before coming down here, I asked, what is it that the 4 teams of students wanted us to try to tell members of Congress and the staffs and the people who were sitting there paying attention to this? And first think about your place in history. There was a call for leadership. Second, be honest about the problem. Said, we're grown-ups, we can take it, we want to be engaged. A frank discussion, third, about what will happen if we don't solve the problem, because the students, as groups of students of public policy, understand about why this matters. And fourth, and this is the most important one of all, one of the students said in response to what should we tell them? Disagreement should be the beginning of the conversation, not the end of it. And there's probably no better lesson about the importance of the Budget Hero game than this notion that disagreement should be the beginning of the conversation, not the end of it. Every group went through the process of trying to figure out how do we sort of puzzle through. We don't all agree, but they all agreed that they had to agree on a way forward. And what was striking about this is how far down that road they got by agreeing to work together. That it's not only a matter of getting through the wonky budget process, but also understanding that it's citizenship at its purest form that's at the bottom of this. And that's why we're so excited at the School of Public Policy at the University of Maryland to be partnering with the Wilson Center to do exactly that. So let me toss it to Dave Rajewski, who will tell you about the game and about how it works. We're thrilled to have a chance to be able to work with you.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. This is not going to work in terms of the distance. That's okay. I think I'm okay. So in 2002, I basically started to talk to people at the Wilson Center about using video games. So you can imagine the look on their face, right? They already knew I was somewhat crazy, and that confirmed it for everyone that I was totally crazy. And it was interesting. If you go 10 years, some of you might have seen the December edition of The Economist. There was a 14-page supplement in there on video games. Okay, which is really, I thought, quite unusual. And it ended with this sentence. It said that video games will be the most powerful, fastest growing, and exciting mass media in the coming decade. And I think, going back 10 years, that was something that sort of caught our attention, that this was a way of actually changing the nature of the conversation with people around big, complex, domestic and international policy issues, both in terms of the reach. We could all of a sudden reach millions of people, not just the people who showed up at the Wilson Center, but we could actually fundamentally change the nature of the engagement, because it was interactive. So we could actually have a discussion with people and dialogue, and there was feedback. So there was a huge sort of, at least, revolution in my mind, even though it took me a long time to convince people, and Jane got it immediately, she said. So as Jane said, we launched this with APM in 2008. The game's been played 1.3 million times. We've gotten at least 20,000 emails through various channels. And I'll just sort of tell you, I think, what the lesson is about games. Why is this so powerful? The first thing is it gives people the big picture. So I don't know how many of you at University of Maryland experience this, but we get thousands of emails that say, I've never seen the whole budget. Is it a secret? Is it classified? No, nobody has really seen the whole budget. And that's one of the first takeaways. As the students play it, you'll see it. The other thing is very seldom do people see actually where the money is going. So quite often the debate is around military spending or healthcare spending, but actually seeing how big the healthcare spending is in relationship to education is a huge takeaway for people. It's very basic, but believe me, most people have never seen the whole budget. So that's the first one. Second one is people like complexity. Right? Hard to believe, but we get emails, put more cards in the game. Right? So if I take a normal report on the budget and I keep adding complexity, you put it on the shelf. Right? And it actually, they want to be challenged. The third thing is this is a learning machine. I mean, anybody who looks at learning theory will tell you again and again, if you want people to learn, let them test hypotheses. What if I do X? Okay, you can go into the game, and the students have tried this, I'm sure. I want to get rid of humanities spending. I want to raise the threshold for Social Security. Amtrak, forget about Amtrak. Let's cut EPA's budget in half. You can do this. It's like essentially a flight simulator. Crash it, get up, try it again. And so it's an incredible learning machine. And because it's a learning machine, you could take and just plug this into all the organizations where there's digital natives. Right? I'm not a digital native. I'm too old. Jane is probably too old. I mean, we could do this, but the kids are digital natives. And so this game actually flows very easily into schools. It was used at the Naval Academy a few years ago to teach the cadets about economics. We have a partnership with BrainPop to get it into a lot of the schools around America. We've created now lesson plans for 12th grade civics and economics. And we're doing a lot of work, as you saw today, Don, with public policy schools. So you've got a learning machine. It's very powerful. It's not afraid of complexity, and we can plug it into schools. The other thing is out of the back end of this machine is coming enormous amounts of data. So we have 17,000 data points going back 4 years that we can actually combine and look at demographic data, income data, age data, and get a sense of what cards people are playing. What policies did they pick? So we know after 4 years the most popular policy is pulling the troops out. And that's a value statement. I mean, maybe that the country is somewhat war fatigued, whatever it is. That never goes away, even though we've changed the financial impact. So we have all of a sudden longitudinal data that I think is very valuable. It becomes, the idea of using a game as a survey tool is something that I think is new. The other thing, and the reason the APM link is important, is we believe that this should be part of journalism. I mean, it's kind of a strange idea, but you can do better journalism, that we can create a cohort of people that are really savvy about fiscal dynamics, and we can use that to sort of drive the co-creation of stories and new kinds of journalistic narratives that are outside of what we see every day in the op-ed pages that have essentially been captured by a few writers. So I'm going to let Linda talk a little bit about this, because without APM, I think the journalistic link would not have happened. And this is something that's really unique about this game.
Thanks, Dave. So as Dave said, games are just a great way to engage and inform. And if you're in journalism today, you know engagement is the buzzword, whether it's social media engagement, but there's engagement for engagement's sake, and then there's like real engagement. And these games, are a way to, there's an interplay with the people. We have the ability to reach back out and talk to these people. We know who they are. They give us not only their demographic information, but in many cases their names, their email addresses, their phone numbers, and we can actually engage with them. We've got some 70,000 people have contributed demographic information. And that allows journalists to reach back out to folks and say, okay, so what is important to you? Why is that important? What personal experience informs who you're going to vote for? And beyond policy, we can reach back out to them about report on parenting issues, report on autism, report on, not just healthcare reform and policy issues, but, the stuff of everyday life. And I would also say that, so we've been at this for a while. So we've been doing it for 4 years, and as Dave pointed, we've been collecting a lot of data, but it's not just numbers data, it's narrative data. So we've got the stories to go with this. And you've heard several times about the trade-offs people are willing to make. You know, I would tell Representative Hoyer, I have good news for him, that the American public has an incredible capacity to understand complex issues like the budget, and they want more complexity, and they're willing to talk about it. The question is, are we in the media and as Congress ready and willing to listen and then act? And I think that is the next step. This is a conversation starter, in my opinion. This is not a way for people to go in and prove that they can fix the budget where other people have failed, although that might be the case. To me, this is just the first step to engage the American public in a more detailed, more nuanced conversation about the deficit, about the issues, about the role of government, and about, you know, what choices they're willing to make and support, and do it in an election season. Takeaways, besides what Dave mentioned, people are totally willing to make trade-offs that go counter to their own self-interest. You know, defense contractors willing to cut the defense budget. Real estate agents willing to get rid of the mortgage interest deduction. And we hear that time and time again. Second thing is, since we've been doing it since 2008, we can see how the game has changed and how people's priorities have changed. So people who played the game in 2008, we heard regularly from many people, this isn't that hard. Bring the troops home, you know, expire the Bush tax cuts, and I can fund Social Security, Medicare, and a number of other programs. Not so easy now. I mean, a lot has happened to the budget, the economy in the last 4 years. So not surprisingly, people tell us it was much harder to move the needle. But they also say, I made deeper cuts to programs I thought were untouchable 4 years ago. Now, I don't know what that portends for the election, but I can say I find it very interesting as a journalist. And I would say the last thing is just this idea that people are craving, they really are, a more detailed and nuanced conversation about this stuff. And I think, you know, when we get it into the education circles, when we get it, I mean, the media, much of what people know about this stuff, they get from the media. So if we're not in touch with people and what they care about, we're not doing an adequate job of representing that back to the public. So that's why we're in this. That's why we really, you know, appreciate having such a great partner like the Wilson Center, because they get it. And the American people get it. I think that's the important takeaway that I have from Budget Hero. And I think, Dave, do you want to introduce, you know, Jessica and Zach, or Dean? And so we're going to have them reveal some of their takeaways. You want to, or Desiree, I'm sorry, not Jessica. My apologies. You want to come up, and do you need a more formal introduction, or do we want to come up and, Diane, have someone talk about what we did this afternoon and what the students learned from playing the game?
Sure. Actually, I think they're going to have a chance to play now.
Oh,
this is what this setup will permit. Desiree, would you like to play first?
Sure.
So this is Desiree, who is going to, you're going to play as trying to achieve the Obama badge, correct? Yes? Wonderful. So we'll sit you here. All right. And I can turn the table to you.
You really do have to take into consideration the ideas that other people have, their values and their perspectives, and I can only imagine having to do that with other members of Congress. We were just a group of 6 people, and we all had fairly similar ideologies, but when you get into people's values, people do start to get protective of some of the things that they want to see cut or they want to see increase. So playing it by yourself versus playing it in a group was a very different setting, and I think probably more realistic to what members experience.
This seems to be a network problem. Is there anything, sorry, from Congressman Hoyer's office? Yeah, okay. It's in, yeah, which we were having many before this event began.
But maybe while we're getting the technical piece of this, it might be worth having Zach and Desiree
absolutely
discuss
talk about what they experienced today.
So
your
experience, what was it like playing this game?
Yes. Do you want to join and come up here, Zachary?
Oh, this is I got 35% battery, so.
Okay. Should they using the tip?
So I actually didn't have the opportunity to play the game this morning because I was at work, but being a Republican, playing this in the comfort of my own home where people aren't going to be seeing what I'm doing necessarily, I'm generally a big fan of fiscal federalism and sort of transferring some of those responsibilities back to the states, like education. But using this game, I was able to see that that's not enough. It's not enough to say, I want to cut education spending and ask the states to take more of that, or to say healthcare really isn't a federal responsibility. I really wasn't able to get to a level where the budget was back in balance without raising taxes or with playing the card that the Bush tax cuts would be extended. So it really opened my eyes to see that this is going to require a mixed solution of cutting spending and raising revenue. There isn't really a way to just say, we're going to downsize the government without, of course, making it unrecognizable from what it is now. And I don't think that making it unrecognizable is something that would satisfy many Americans. So it was a really valuable resource in seeing this has to be a mixed solution, and we have to work together to get there.
Okay, do you want to, so we seem
Yeah, we can go ahead
to now have an so start again. Nice. Actually,
There it goes.
there you go. Okay, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll turn it.
Now, do you want to describe?
Yeah, we'll go ahead and describe what we're doing. So first, I think pretty much every group when we played today and what we do pretty much every time was started with the taxes. That seemed to be something that it took a lot of the debating while we were doing it in the groups, and it's something I think people deliberate on quite a bit. So my goal is to earn the Obama badge, which means typically you're selecting policies that are in place with what the politician is saying. There are other badges that mean certain things, and you pick policy cards based on what you're trying to accomplish, based on your values and what's going to be best for the budget as well. So in trying to earn this badge, one of the things that I would do is keep the Bush tax breaks for all but the wealthy. Hopefully, let me see if the card will. Yeah. So when you double click on a card, it gives you information about the pros and the cons and the social impact of what playing that policy card would mean for the economy, which is what they were mentioning before with the journalism aspect of it. So I found this to be really helpful. There were different policy cards where I may have heard of something before, but I wasn't quite sure on everything, and this was a really great way to find out what some of those pros and cons were and what those implications would be in the future. Then you can click play card, and you see that it makes the adjustments on the screen there. Also, link AMT. You double click again and you can see the pros and cons, and then you can also play the card. We see here defense and diplomacy, and if you click on any of these one time, it'll bring up the policy cards that you want to play for this. As we're decreasing our troops, I'm going to select rapidly cut war-related spending, and you can, you're supposed to drag it over. Okay, yeah, it might be that you have to open up the card with this. And then you can play card. And then we're also decreasing AIDS funding overseas. And these are things that hopefully over the years we'll be able to decrease war spending, obviously, and hopefully there will be scientific initiatives and discoveries that will help with finding cures and treatments for AIDS that are far more economical. And one of the things we can do to help find those is investing in our K through 12 education. So this is the school and kids part of the budget, where we're going to increase funding for science and math. And you can see, again, the pros and cons and the impacts of that. And you play that card. And then one that's very near and dear to my heart, obviously as a grad student right now, is make college more affordable. So we play that card as well. And we can continue to see the different implications of the decisions that we're making policy-wise. And then from there, we're also, some of these budgets have more options than others. We saw taxes had quite a few. Healthcare and Social Security, some of those have quite a few more, and some of them, like school and education, had a smaller amount. Here, we're also going to fund research on clean energy, which is a component of the president's platform, since we're trying to achieve that badge. And we can go ahead and see how our budget stacks up. So we see that we were able to obtain that badge for Barack Obama, and then it gives you your 10-year budget impact based on the decisions that you've made through the policy cards. So I don't know if you want to go ahead and...
So just in terms of game mechanics, the motivation for this game, some of you might have gotten was Pokemon. So if some of you probably you maybe remember Pokemon cards or Magic cards. If you've ever played with them, it was a card with a bunch of strategies on it. Or if you played bridge or anything else. And so one of the reasons that I think it's easy for people to get into this game is because everyone's played cards. If you're young, you've played strategy card games. The great gamers have played bridge, whatever, poker. So it's one of the things we struggle with is how do we create a game that it's very easy for you or anyone at any age to kind of get in and not struggle with it. So there's no big secret about this, but some of you might have recognized that you're basically playing you're playing Magic cards or Pokemon. You build your hand up and you play them against the game.
All right, I'm going to be playing for the Governor Romney card here. Let me just, for the sake of time, get to the game. So if it'll let me, there we go. There it goes. So I think, like Desiree did, the first place to go, especially with Governor Romney's plan, is for taxes, though we're admittedly going to have a little bit of a different outcome. So I'm going to select keeping the Bush tax cuts for everyone because we don't need to be raising taxes on people during a recession, especially on the middle class and small businesses who might fall into that wealthy citizen group. So that didn't sound good. So we'll play that card. And another card that I'm going to play is eliminate the AMT. So that'll help to simplify the tax code and also get people who were an index for inflation and are really middle class people off of the shadow tax system. Now I'm just going to see what else we have here. And there are a lot of different options that can be played. So we'll just move on to healthcare, which I think is probably one of the cornerstones of Governor Romney's campaign, especially around the Healthcare Reform Act. And there's actually a card where you can eliminate the health reform bill. So we'll play that card. And another thing that Governor Romney's mentioned is increasing Medicare eligibility to 67. Now that people are living longer and also the system is being stressed with more and more people each year. Then move over to look at some miscellaneous items. And assuming that'll load. All right.
So the other thing that's useful, I think, here is you actually, because the game is keeping tabs of people who play. So these are your cards, and these are the percentage of people who played your cards. So it's falling back on a very large database. And you can obviously put this on Facebook, you can tweet about it, you could send it to your grandmother, or you can actually decide to compare yourself with any other demographic. So you can say, well, what about, you know, people my age in the Midwest that identify themselves as libertarians? What did they play? And it'll pull up all of your cards and compare those. So there's essentially an ability for the game to link to social media and essentially give you a sense of how what you're doing is comparing with all the other people we have in the database.
You know, we considered and looked at, we looked at putting a link on here so you could email your budget to members of Congress, but do you know how hard they've made it to email members of Congress? I mean, there's no easy way where they just have a direct email anymore where we could do that. But I do want to say one thing that, I love Jane and I hate correcting her when she's not here, but the gender gap in the game actually is the only gap in the game. So we've got, you know, over the 1.3 million plays, we've got great political parity, you know, across all parties, across age groups, but there is a gender gap. You know, many more men play the game than women. And so, you know, anything about getting the word out to get more women to play the game would be great.
The public is a lot smarter than often the public's given credit for. That for those who are cynical about the role of citizens in American society, those who are deeply worried about whether or not citizens can be or want to be led, there's no doubt as you watch people play this game that citizens are perfectly capable of absorbing high levels of complexity and working their way through this and getting successfully to the finish line. And that ultimately what this is about is not only about trusting citizens again and trusting citizens with being able to absorb information, but also that there is inevitably, as I've watched this time after time, a call to leadership that comes out of this. That citizens say, no, we can puzzle this through. It's really hard. We understand that not everybody's going to agree, but if we can get there, and if it's that important, what can we do to get our elected representatives to the table, having the same conversation we are, and with luck, more or less getting to the same place. And understanding, as our students pointed out, that the disagreement is the beginning of the conversation, but it can't be the end. And the game is in part about, wow, it is really cool. Secondly, that it's complex, but there are solutions if you puzzle through. But it is at once incredibly hopeful as well on top of that. And that's, if there's any lesson that I'd like to leave, it's that. And why I was feeling good watching, as I said, one of our students who's expecting, and she was having to get up and walk around a little bit, and I was sitting there thinking, this is why we're playing this. But there's hope in the middle of all the cynicism that surrounds this, and the reason for playing this is being able to connect this to what it is that really matters for the country. Any concluding thoughts we want to try to?
Any questions?
We are really grateful to all of you. Question back here. Yes, sir.
How do you guys measure, how do you measure like investments in, I believe you mentioned Amtrak and education and how this might affect GDP and then tax revenue and tax income from this point inside the game?
So the game is built on largely on the Congressional Budget Office model. So an awful lot of the policies are scored regularly by the CBO. And they come out, one of the advantages of building the game on the CBO model is that we can update it pretty regularly. You know, they're updating the projections every 6 months or so, and we can get those to flow right into the game. When we can't find data from CBO, we go to other sources. So there's an awful lot of data in here about the so-called tax extenders, all these policies and taxes that are going to expire at the end of the year. For a lot of that data, we went to the Congressional Research Service and the Joint Committee on Taxation. If we can't find it there, we'll go to other think tanks, we'll call up academics. Diane, I think you worked on something with taxing sugar.
Yeah, sugar-sweet beverages, and consulted at the top sort of people in documenting what those costs were, and not only costs in terms of revenues that might be generated, but also the sort of ongoing effects in terms of spending, public spending on healthcare, diabetes coverage, and all that kind of stuff. And that stuff has been documented. And these were all sort of peer-reviewed top health magazines,
So the numbers are largely, scoring numbers. I think when you look at the pros and cons, we didn't attempt, this is a nonpartisan game, but we didn't attempt to take politics out of it because that's part of the battle. And so those pros and cons come from multiple sources. They could be think tanks on the right. It could be the Cato Institute, American Enterprise, Center for American Progress on the left. So we tried to give people kind of, and this is where the reporting comes in, almost a storyline of just how's the argument play out between the left and the right and a lot of the people. And as you scroll down, which you didn't get a chance to do, you'll see everything is cited.
Okay.
So we're very obsessive about, we want to tell you where we took the information from. If it was a CBO data, if it came from the Energy Information Administration, from Cato, it doesn't matter. We source everything.
And, I just want to say again that I know that when you play this game, it's hard not to feel like I'm in charge and I'm going to fix the budget. But we don't have every policy that's ever been scored by CBO in here. And I think we list, if you go in the data, it'll explain like how did you choose which policy options to put in or take out. And we preen policies out of here on a regular basis that just are no longer part of the real public debate, or they've already been enacted and therefore they're incorporated into the game. But right, sure, right. So we add and we also take out policies that are no longer relevant. But that is and that's also a drawback in that there are many ideas out there for what to do with the budget, but if it hasn't been scored, so what you end up is largely the game is filled with policies that are already part of the public discourse and the debate. But we fully expect that leads to new ideas and innovative ideas about what to do with the budget. And one of I think the most inspiring things I've heard from players of the game is that we reached out to them and said, are you using Budget Hero as a teaching tool? And we were doing this because we thought we would get educators to write to us. And just everyday people wrote back and said, yes, I sat down with my brother-in-law and my sister and my daughter and my son, and it makes it so much easier to have a conversation about the budget and the politics and everything. It's like, almost like it's a neutralizer for people, and they feel like just the game gives them a nice little, on-ramp to have a more civil discussion with people about politics or the role of government. And I find that really refreshing.
Any other questions? This is a tremendously exciting opportunity here, not only to try to tackle what everybody understands is the #1 issue in this town and in this nation, but to demonstrate that it's a problem ultimately that we can solve, but through a technique that is fascinating and novel. And it's one of the reasons why we at the School of Public Policy are just so pleased to have a chance to be able to partner with American Public Media and with the Wilson Center on something that we hope will really be a difference maker. So thanks very much to all of you for coming today. Obviously, if you have other questions, want to follow up, which we hope that this conversation will help to promote, we're really looking forward to engaging you further. Thanks again.